My name is Thi Bui, or Bui Phương Thi as my mother named me. I'm an author, an educator, and sometimes organizer.
Welcome to The Vietnamese. I'm your host, Kenneth Nguyen. Being part of a culture of nearly 100 million Vietnamese people in the world today comes with a lot of pain, proud history, and privilege. Join me as I highlight and explore the Vietnamese experience from all over the world.
What does it mean to be Vietnamese to you?
It feels lucky in a way, and unlucky in some other ways. It means having lived through a lot or having parents who lived through a lot more. And it means getting to speak in a musical language. And it means having perspective on, living here in the US.
How you just reframed musical. You just said a language that's musical. And through other interviews, I've also kind of experienced that reframing from you with the diacritics and the pronunciation. And I think many of us in our generation grew up very ashamed of this tonal language and it sounding very jarring, compared to, the Romance languages. And so thank you for normalizing it. And now not just normalizing, but elevating it, because that's such an important thing for confidence for Vietnamese kids.
Yeah, thank you for making this amazing collection of all kinds of Vietnamese voices in the diaspora. I'm learning stuff from following you about fairy tales and history that I didn't know growing up. It's so nice to have it, in the language that I read better because, I love Vietnamese as a language, but I didn't get to grow up learning it in the same way that I learned English. So English is kind of like the language that I need to reclaim this heritage. So it's really great to have this resource.
Well, shout out to my social media team at Good House. They put together and they compile everything, and they pass it through to me, and I kind of make a little adjustments here and there. But for the most part, that team is phenomenal.
Nice. It does take a team, right?
Yes, it really does. It really does, and they do a great job. So you did you come out of university as what did you study? Did you want to be a teacher, or what were you trying to get into?
No, I wanted to either be a civil rights lawyer or an artist. So I double majored in political science and art. And then I switched from political science to legal studies because nicer people were in legal studies. And at this time, I, sort of idealized the judicial branch of government as the cool branch. Things have changed, but I did get inspired by a lot of history of the civil rights movement and wanted to, help make the world a better place. And so I thought I could either do that through the law or through art. And then I went to New York to be an artist. And I had a terrible time in grad school. I almost flunked out of my MFA in sculpture. And that's when I stopped drawing for a few years. And I felt like an outsider,
Oh. So you were getting the MFA at NYU and you got a master's in art education at NYU as well?
The MFA was at Bard College in upstate New York.
Got it.
Then I was living in New York City.
And what was that experience like teaching in New York City? Was it high school?
Yeah, it was high school. During the training, I did all the ages, everything from kindergarten up through high school. And I really liked high schoolers. I really connected with their maturity and snarkiness, but they're still young enough to have an impact on. I had a good time. I befriended a lot of the kids who got in trouble a lot, and they would tend to come to my classroom and hang out, and I would give them extra credit for things that weren't necessarily academic. And that was just a way to bring them back into the fold, so respecting them as a human being and not just a cog in an educational system helped a lot.
What are your sentiments on the education system in the United States today?
My feeling about being a teacher in public schools was it was trying to do this really hard job while people were trying to burn your building down. So it's tough from all angles, and then during COVID, it was impossible for teachers to do a good job because they didn't even have like continuity.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going to happen the next month.
And this is a sentiment you feel today, like teaching is, you're trying to do your job in a burning building now. Like this is how you feel about it the last few years.
This is how I felt about it before the pandemic. So
Wow.
I can't even imagine. I haven't been a public school teacher during the pandemic, but hats off to them.
Now, while you were teaching all these years, you probably had a seed of, the art, right? You had to really go back to producing art, your art. Can you tell me about that? I don't know if it was a struggle for you or what the journey was like while you're having your day job teaching and then, having this sort of urge to produce. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. I guess for some people, like the urge goes away after a while. And then for me, it was like this hunger that got more and more intense the longer I wasn't feeding it. And so for a while, I was like living vicariously through my students because I taught art. And even when I wasn't given a class that was strictly art, like I got given a computer literacy class and I turned it into a movie making class.
Wow.
I just got them cameras and got them excited about making movies. And that was how I taught them computer skills. So I was living vicariously through the projects that I assigned to my students. Like I had my art class, tell their immigration stories in the form of comics for a few years. Birth of where the best we could do comes from was when I was still living in New York. I had already, actually, while I was in grad school for the education masters, my thesis advisor, who was the great person I talked about, actually let me do a thesis project that wasn't really related to education. It was interviews with my family and sort of a literature review on like how the Vietnam War had been represented in the US in pop culture and academia. And I just got to talk about representation and then try to offer an alternative to the kind of crap that had been done.
Yeah.
And I didn't want it to just be words. So I added like photographs and some drawings and some bad graphic design. And the book that I made was like actually the beginning of the best we could do. And then I got a grant from Fund for Teachers to go to Vietnam and take my mother. And we went through all the places that we had ever lived as a family and that they had ever lived. And then I had all this material. But then I had to teach, and I was also pregnant with my son when I went. So, life kind of got in the way. Mm-hmm. And that's partly why the best we could do took so long. So
you have this book for a few years and it's sitting there, right? In your mind, were you thinking that you got to expand this somehow and sharpen it up and refine it? Or was it just sitting there and it just collecting dust?
Kind of. It was sitting there collecting dust, but I think I was sharpening my skills because I knew that I hadn't done comics before, and I needed to teach myself this new language that I wanted to write in. So I was reading books, and then teaching is a great way to learn new things because then you have to turn it around quickly and explain it to somebody else, and then just the iterative process of teaching helps you refine, like, okay, this is a good approach, this is not such a good approach. And like while I was teaching the students to make their own comics, I was kind of teaching myself how I wanted to make comics.
But why comics? Why teach the kids comics and not another form? I'm just curious, like why? Yeah. Why that form?
Well, partly it was that I was teaching English language learners, and so English was not like the best language, right? These words were not the best language for them to be using. They had all this knowledge in them that wasn't verbal and wasn't in English. And a lot of them were like really good at drawing. Like my Korean refugee students who had like grown up in refugee camps in Thailand, they had this like memory of their camp, like burned into their memories. And they could draw it. And those drawings conveyed so much more information than whatever they could write. So the combination of the two unlocked these really powerful stories.
And just in my opinion, I think that the best we could do, the way the form, the comic book form is so much it's just so appropriate for the way that the narrative has unfolded. I mean, in film, it's sort of, you got to set up so much crap. I mean, I'm talking about the financing all the way to the story, the way everything's structured. But this, while I was reading it, allowed me to really breathe. And, I had it on my nightstand next to my bed. And it allowed me to sort of go through it for about a month. And, sometimes I would just turn back to previous chapters and kind of, it's perfect because you can really allow it to soak in the stories and the vignettes to kind of like go to bed thinking about this stuff. And it's very appropriate.
Thank you. That makes me happy to hear that you took your time, because I've heard from people that they read it in an hour or two, and I'm like, great, that took me 10 years, but
I have friends that read it in 3 days as well. And then I just wanted to be the contrarian because I'm like, there's no reason to rush through a book like this. So I took my time reading it. And, I wanted to ask you about, as artists, there's a certain inability to focus in on one thing because we're so creative and our brains are constantly having new ideas. Were there other competing narratives or stories that you had in the production line beyond the
story?
Book? Yeah.
Yeah, there always are. I always have like 5 things I'd like to be working on. And a lot of them are not nonfiction. Some of them are, but then you have to focus in order to do things well. Yeah.
And how did you focus on The Best We Could Do? I mean, there's like 4 other projects in your book.
Yeah. I think like, have you ever seen that diagram of like, I think it comes from, I think there's like a Japanese word like ikigai or something.
Yes.
Where you've got like the overlap of 4 different things and like including what you're good at and what you care about and what you can get paid for. And then there's the pedal that's like what other people need. That one drives me a lot.
It's like a Venn diagram, the Ikigai Venn diagram.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So, my other projects fit into these other pedals, but The Best We Could Do felt like something that I could do and care about and get paid for, but also that was useful for other people.
When I think about The Best We Could Do, I often, I was going to ask you, like, the we refers to you and your family, or are you speaking on behalf of just your parents or Vietnamese diaspora in general?
I'll leave that one kind of open-ended. I was thinking a lot about parents and children when that title came to me. It's a title that tries to wrap up some empathy and understanding, as well as so the book is told from my point of view, but I'm listening to my parents talk about their story. So there is like kind of like there are different hats being worn, and there's an attempt to understand. We did the best we could do is a commonly heard phrase, right? Sometimes the best someone could do wasn't good enough for you, though. So there's that. So it's a somewhat ambiguous title that's kind of about parents and children.
Your son. Do you ever think about that with your son?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. Well, that's the point of empathy. And that's why I start the whole book with like me crossing that threshold into parenthood, because that's when I realized this is a job I'm going to mess up at some point.
How old is your son
if
now?
Not all the time.
And how old is your son now?
He's 16, going on 17.
About that sort of journey about you fucking things up? Do you sort of journey about fucking things up? Do you?
I'm pretty candid. I think I try to be a lot more transparent than my parents were, and I also have learned to apologize pretty quickly if I make a mistake.
Like, we grew up hard. Our parents are like, what?
Yeah.
Vietnamese, this is what
Yeah.
mom and dad always used to say, we don't fucking apologize for anything. That's what my mom and dad, we are Vietnamese parents. We do not say sorry. That's one thing we do not do. That was in my house. Like my mom and dad never apologized. Now it's a little bit different because, I think it's, over the years but when I was growing up, they don't. And that's so I feel like if they don't apologize, you just have to suck it up and there's no closure to these little vignettes of like destruction. That makes us a little harder and more resilient. Are we doing a disservice to our children?
Yeah, I've often wondered the same thing. Like, oh man, am I taking something away from my son's character by being nice to him or by providing for him, right? I don't know that you can manufacture adversity though. It's not honest. So at some point I have to admit, well, I'm also living this comfortable middle-class life now. And my daily life is not full of, strife. So why should his be? And then sometimes life will give you some adversity. And then that's when you learn how soft or hard or resilient or resourceful your kid is. And it's heartbreaking, but also it's eye-opening. And I've learned that my son is stronger than I thought he was. And also I've learned that, when he doesn't have me, he takes care of himself quite well. And he's actually, he steps up. And then as soon as I come back, he oversleeps and I have to get him up for work. And I think that's about the comfort of having someone there for you. Someone to take care of you lets you relax. And when you don't get to relax and you're hard and all of these things that we're assigning all this value to, you get stressed out and the stress hurts you in other ways, right? So I'm hoping that, my son will have the stamina to live a long and healthy life if I save him from some of the stress that comes from having to be so self-reliant.
So I saved, and it's Nowhere Land, right? The project, is that the name? Okay, yeah, I have it for a little bit later, but let's talk about it. How far along are you in the development of it?
Hopefully after this summer, I'll be able to give you a more complete answer. But I have like tons of research and material, like interviews with people and sketches and kind of a sprawling outline of the whole book. But I think I'm going to tear that up and start again this summer.
Holy cow. Is it also a comic?
Yeah. I guess it would be it's a big comic book, like probably almost the same length as the best we could do by the time I'm done with it, and nonfiction.
Now, when you work on another project and you're kind of doing it and shaping it like the best we could do you think of changing the style of it, or do you kind of keep within the same parameters, the color, the feel, all of that?
Yeah, no, it's good to backwards plan when you're doing something big. So to be realistic about how much change there can be. So, if I'm going for something with this much length and I also want it to be good writing, I might put more of my eggs in that basket and fewer in like coloring and other new skills that I want to develop. So I've let myself like explore like color in the children's books that I've illustrated, but the style of something this long is going to need to be more simple and probably only like one spot color plus black line work. And I'll probably draw digitally, or maybe a combination of analog and digital.
Wow. The style, the movement, the feel of the artwork, that has to have evolved over time, right?
Oh yeah, I had to redraw the early pages a lot because my style changed so much over the course of the 10 years working on it.
Yeah, it feels alive, but alive in a period piece, like a film, right? It has that feel, and I know that some, like an artist like you could never come up with that in a year, right? There's a true evolution of, like, when did you know that you were finished with it? The feel, the design of the feeling of it.
when I finished it. No, I think I got up to like chapter 8 out of 10 when I finally felt like, oh, I know how to draw comics. This is definitely not a work of mastery. I don't look back on it and go, wow, these are really good. I actually cringe looking at most of the pages now. But it was a time capsule of where I was at during those years.
The best you could do.
It really was.
And then there's the Eisner Award. Like,
I got nominated. I didn't win it.
Oh, okay. But that's a big deal as well, right?
Yeah.
Did you see that coming? Did you,
when you work hard on something and you feel like you made something that hasn't been made before, you kind of hope for some recognition for sure. And I learned some of this from a colleague of mine who was nominated the same year, John Jennings, who actually did win it that year for his graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's Kindred. He was like, we better get an award, you and me both. I was like, okay, John, yeah, so I was pumped. And it's always nice. It's always nice to be recognized.
Yeah.
But it's also nice to watch other people win. So it's all good.
Especially if they're friends, right?
Well, especially if their work is good. Yeah, I guess if they were a jerk, you would be a little bit miffed, but it's fine. The big thing is getting to make work. Because I'll be honest with you, it's a lot easier to be an artist than to be a public school teacher.
Really?
Yeah, when you make money as an artist, sure. Like, it's hard to get to that point where you can actually make a living on this, but once you do, it's like, I call my own hours. I can say yes or no to things. I don't think that we actually love kids in this country, or else we would devote more resources to them. And even in a progressive state like California, it's still like 40 something. It's ranked 40 something out of 50 states in terms of per pupil funding from the state. And that has to do with our tax structure. But, where are the resources? And why is it so hard to be a teacher? And why do we demand that they solve all of society's problems, and we still pretend that all they do is teach content, academic content, So it's no wonder that there's a shortage of teachers right now.
But why are we not funding more? What do you think it is? Why is the...
like, my cynical view is like, we don't love our kids enough.
What's the practical side of it?
What do you mean?
Why can't we allocate more? Is it...
Well, there's a lot of segregation in this country, right? It's like people love their own kids a lot, but can they love everybody's kids? Why is there so much like self-imposed segregation? Why is there like white flight from urban schools? Why do the Black and brown kids and the Southeast Asian kids get left in the poorest, roughest schools? Is because people took their resources and went to more desirable places. And then you definitely see some color lines there.
But do we have a chance and an opportunity to make it better? How can we, as a society, American society, make that better?
I think it could. I in spite of talking about a lot of problems, I remain an optimist. Some days it's easier than others to be an optimist, but I am ultimately hopeful that, it's never too late. It's never too late to swing things around. And part of it has to do with a belief in a common cause. I do believe in public education, because that's supposed to be the place where, democratically we can provide free quality education to all kids, not just some kids. And it has to be kind of a group leap of faith, right? So you have to have like administrators that people can believe in. They have to have good teachers that will work there. And the parents also have to buy into this idea that together, we can make schools that are good for kids.
Going back to the best we could do and this idea of catharsis, was there catharsis after the book being in the world? And was there a sense of relief from the weight of your family, our collective sense of identity? Do you feel like it was something that you were finished with and you could move on, or is it something that continues to kind of grow and you're still very much still growing from it? You know, I guess the question is, I'm not looking for an absolute answer, but I'm looking for what your kind of overall result in your emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could think of one moment of catharsis, because it wasn't like a clear catharsis, like you're onto something there. But it was the moment that I went back to Vietnam after finishing the book. And I went back to research another project. I was interested in learning more about climate change in the Mekong Delta. And I went, and I had this completely different relationship with the country. Like I was no longer looking at everybody for pieces of my own story. And I wasn't needing them to answer any kind of yearning in me, because I had worked that out in the book. And so I felt like I could finally see this country more objectively as this really vibrant place that had a lot of struggles too, full of like 95 million people who are not me. So I felt like I was able to remove myself from things more and just see people for who they were and learn about them in a new way.
Wow, what a sense of growth, right? I think Vietnamese Americans of our generation, some of us have not been allowed to reach that feeling. You know, we carry a lot of unseen weight around. But you did the work, and I think that you deserve to have that experience when you go back, and you know you can separate that the weight of all of the meaning, and you know, and that's something that's unspoken. You know, in our families we don't talk about too often, but now we're starting to the conversation.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is the flip side to being so tough and hard, right? And not talking about things, is that we have a lot of unresolved issues in us, and we need to heal those parts in order to get this catharsis.
Yeah. You know, the Mekong Delta and the climate change, and can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what I learned, and my research is a 2-3 years old now, but I think it's not too much has changed. The Mekong Delta is home to, at the time, 17 million people, and it's like the you know what they call the breadbasket of America. It's like the rice bowl of Vietnam. Like it produces, you know, like half the country's rice and a lot of other things too. And it's becoming less and less usable for agriculture because of one, like dams being built upriver in other countries, like, you know, have taken a lot of the nutrients out of the soil, but also the sea is rising. So that's actually irreparable damage when that happens, because salt salt kills everything. So this is kind of horrifying, because we see a lot in the news about floods and typhoons, and those are more vivid images, but like it's a lot. Turns out it's really hard to represent the sea slowly rising, because it's not like it's going to flood everything. Yeah. It's just that it kills everything slowly. And what that's going to do is cause everyone to have to migrate away. And that's a lot of people. Plus, like food, you know, food is important for our survival. So I was pretty terrified, and I wanted to go understand it from the point of view of the farmers and people who lived there. And it turns out that Vietnamese people are so resilient that they weren't talking about it as a problem in the same way that I had heard about it as a problem here in the US. They were just surviving it like another thing. Like, what else have they, you know, I mean, they were like, what else have you got? Like, you know, people turn like the craters that are left from American bombs into ponds and things there. So this is just like another thing that they have to adjust to. So it's kind of amazing. And also, I haven't figured out exactly how to write about it yet.
Well, the dams that are happening in other countries that spill over into the tributaries, is that what is the rivers and the water supply. That's a very alarming thing that we don't hear much about.
Mm-hmm.
There, I spoke to somebody last year about the activists that are in the Mekong and trying to figure out how the control of the water coming in, because it's China, right? I mean, let's be frank. It's China, and it's a very easy way for a country like China to control the rice basket or the rice bowl of this country, of Vietnam, right? And it's something that we, as Vietnamese Americans or Vietnamese diaspora, we are not really aware of that's happening in, a country, our motherland. And it's a big danger that's that in about a decade could really choke out the economy and the sustenance of farmers in that area.
Yeah. It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah. And I don't know if enough attention is being spotlighted for that issue in the Mekong. I really want to talk more about it with anybody who is involved in the activist community for that.
Okay. We can talk more later.
Yeah.
I'll connect you with people that I meet.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I really wanted to address. When I heard about it a year ago, I was like, wow, this is, well, because my family comes from that, right? My dad's family. That area, and we still have some family in that area. So there's risk of, life deteriorating in a decade or two. Yeah.
Yes. Going back to the resilience, I was reading about how a lot of farmers who are switching from rice to farming shrimp as the water's getting saltier. And then when they want to have rice and shrimp, they just collect rainwater and they, dilute the salinity of the water with more rainwater. It's brilliant, actually.
Wow. Talk about resilience.
Yeah. So I don't know. One of my 5 ideas that I'm juggling all the time is I kind of want to try a short story that's speculative fiction, I guess, set 50 years in the future, and what I imagine an area of the Mekong might look like. Everybody has left for work in the city, and there's nothing left but salty water and salty women. And I have this story that I'm crafting right now about 2 of them.
God, that sounds so interesting. You had me at salty women.
Right? Who doesn't want a story about 2 salty Vietnamese women?
Yeah. There was a film a few years ago by Anh Nguyen, Võ Minh. He directed a movie called Nước. I don't know if you're aware of it.
I haven't gotten to see it yet, but I've heard about it.
It's sort of like the climate change, and the whole country's I think flooded, and it's just all water. Yeah, and it's a very real thing.
Yeah. I'm sensing this hesitation and excitement in you about content that our diaspora creates. I'm going to guess that part of why you kept the book on your table and read it slowly was you weren't sure if I was going to traumatize you, right?
That is definitely part of you
have to be cautious.
Yes, it's part of the equation.
Yeah, that's why I still haven't watched the 10 or 20 part Ken Burns documentary on the war, because I don't trust him. I don't trust an American to make stuff for me. It might be high quality stuff, but I don't know if it's going to re-traumatize me without giving me anything to heal myself with.
That's such a good point.
I also approach all things Vietnamese with a little bit of caution, because I have to shark around them a little bit.
I feel like sometimes me. I want to avoid the trauma. I want to move away from the war speak and projects that are involved. I'm crafting a solo episode under 10 minutes to just speak into the camera and push like the Mekong issue, and just giving information and historical sort of nuggets. But I'm very aware of staying away from traumatic news. Like, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, we got to ring the alarm bells, because the Mekong is going to shit if we don't.
Yeah. We can't exist only in our fantasies. Yeah. So for me, it's about telling the bad news, but also maybe telling giving some tools or resources or some good news, or giving you the story of some people who are trying to do something about it. And it turns out, the last several years in the US have been like a shit show. Can I just say that? Like, they've been hard. And the best place for me to be during that time was with other people trying to do something about it. It felt a lot better than just reading about the
shit show.
Yeah.
Rolling up our sleeves and doing something about it is key, right? It's like putting in action. And that's how I feel about Vietnam. I feel like, discovering the beautiful aspects of Vietnam is my way of coping with past trauma. And I want to move beyond it.
Yeah. How do we deal with it, confront it, not shy away from it, but also like give ourselves things that like nurture us, right?
Yeah. They're not dealing with it. 70% of the population was born after the war. After the war, there's no concept of it's not something that they talk about. It's
right.
It's not even in their rear view mirror.
Yeah. I mean, why I had to deal with it was that, comics often tell origin stories. And I was like, okay, well, the war was kind of a big part of my origin story. Also, if we don't tell that history, then we just allow it to be told by white male historians. That doesn't seem great.
When do you think that we are going to, I mean, God, I hate to have like these line of demarcations, right? Like, oh, this absolute, here's, where the line is. But are we moving gradually out of trauma and painful stories? And are we moving into, I think our generation is, I feel like we're healing in a healthy way, and we are leaving behind these nuggets of truth and history from our perspective. But we're also, I feel like we are gradually moving on. How do you feel about that?
I think people are all over the spectrum. Like, I've met people who are younger than me who, still have a lot of shame that they're having to heal themselves of, the shame that you talked about early on about being ashamed of your language, or the food your mom packed you to school, or whatever, or how you look.
Men growing up in the 80s and 90s, like,
right,
it was brutal.
Yeah.
So, and
yeah, exactly. Or being hypersexualized as a woman, like the me so horny, me love you bota. Like, it's all really painful stuff. And then there's the circumstances of how we came, and then I have a lot of strong feelings about being used as a model minority or a exceptional refugee here to stomp down other people's rights. I'm like, what's that about? So I think maybe my poli-sci background keeps me focused on talking about politics and history and how we're writing it. So I think it's good to attack that stuff from all angles, and it's constant work. A few of us healing doesn't heal the whole diaspora, unfortunately, but it can help.
Yeah. And
the goal, I think, is that narrative plenitude that Viet Thanh Nguyen talked about, so that everybody's got something to help them with their own particular set of issues.
The plenitude. I want to jump into that. The artist plenitude. A lot of artists that, in my community of artists and filmmakers and musicians, we all have to sort of do these side hustles, and we all have to do our teaching or jobs, or, we're all at it, right? We're all at the grind. And then there comes a point when there is like this escape velocity where you make it out of the sphere, start making money through your art. Did you see that ever coming up in your life? Did you kind of project that? The law of attraction, did that confidence to know that if you just kept at it, you would be able to sustain as an artist? Did you have that confidence coming up?
I don't know. I guess I had the hustle and the hard work. Um, I'm a Capricorn sign, if that means anything. I just keep going. And I mean, I feel like I was born hustling. Like just even to get ourselves into college, right, and pay for it.
Yeah.
There wasn't any help. So I felt like I had to write. Probably my earliest forms of writing were so that I could get money to pay for school. A lot of essay contests and applications and whatnot. So the hustle was always there, and yeah, the goals were there to get a thing made, and then you have to buy time to make big things. So I guess one thing led to another. It's hard to predict how the reception is going to be for your book. So all of that was a surprise.
Yeah. And I'm glad that, we have that today, in our world, in our Vietnamese American history. We have it documented in this beautiful work of art.
Thanks.
Did making it into like the Bill Gates top 5 and being incorporated into like UCLA's curriculum, did that change your perspective or your life in any way? Those accolades?
I didn't get any attention from Vietnamese language press until the Bill Gates thing. So yeah, that helped a lot. Vietnamese and Indian aunties and uncles suddenly took the book more seriously. And that's just a tiny dig at our community. And yeah, I mean, getting to talk to college age students is like one of my favorite things, because I remember getting so many questions like from the audience, and every other question it seemed like every other question was, how do I talk to my Vietnamese American parents or my Asian American parents about wanting to become an artist, or like not wanting to study what they want me to study. So I took it to mean like, how do I talk to my parents who are really different from me? So I guess going back to that ikigai flower, like the usefulness of providing a model for people is really lovely. And like at this point, honestly, like I've gotten to fulfill my heart's desire with my life, and I just want to spend the rest of my time here on earth being useful and happy. If I can do both, that would be amazing.
Yeah. How did your mom and dad and your family receive the book?
They received it very well, and that was because I showed them parts of the book as I was going along, rather than surprising them at the end with it all. So they were editors and collaborators from a very early time.
Did they have any idea how big it would be?
I don't think so. I mean, but also, my parents are pretty Vietnamese. Like I wouldn't know that they were especially proud of it, except that sometimes they tell other people and then the news gets back to me.
It's so typical of them.
Yeah.
So typical Vietnamese. Are you ever going to do more work in Vietnam or live in Vietnam, be part of that fabric of the motherland?
I definitely want to go back again to, keep track of the Mekong Delta and the climate change issue. I want to take my son back again. The last time we went was his first time, and we were only in the South, so he wants to see the North next time. And I would like him to learn Vietnamese. It was easier when we were there.
Yeah, but that's a hard task to teach these kids.
I hope to make a difference in making it easier for people to teach their kids. Like there's been like there's like an alphabet book that I've been slowly working on, and there are more like Vietnamese language, like kids books, like picture books. And I feel like there's so many of us, even just here in the US, right? That actually there are more Vietnamese speakers in the US than there are French speakers, but you wouldn't know that from the infrastructure that exists. There are French schools where you can do your education immersed in French, but that doesn't exist in Vietnamese. So we kind of have to create more infrastructure to make it easier.
Yeah. My two kids, I mean, my mother lives with me. I speak Vietnamese decently, and I speak to my mother entirely in Vietnamese. It's so difficult to speak to my children in Vietnamese. My wife's Taiwanese, but it's so difficult to get them to. And it's not them; it's just me being lazy, and you kind of have to force yourself to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like a dad in Vietnamese? Is that part of it? Like, are you still a kid in Vietnamese?
Oh, what a great question. I don't feel any identity as it relates to being Vietnamese with my family, with my children or my wife. I don't feel like a Vietnamese man. I don't feel like a Vietnamese father. I feel very American, actually.
Mm-hmm. So that makes sense that the language that comes out naturally isn't Vietnamese.
Yeah, because I feel like the honorifics of con với ba might, I've never thought about this.
Loaded, right? It makes you
loaded,
some feelings up.
Yeah, it puts barriers up because of the way that it did it for our generation. I don't want them to think that I'm above them. I just want them to think that I just happen to be the person that was, gave birth, my wife gave birth to them, and we just was part of that process. And we're just here to inch them along in their journey, and not as a top-down, hierarchical, patriarchal, so our language is loaded with that stuff. And
and then there's some tenderness in the words ba and ma and stuff too, right? I love the musicality of the language, and I find it really comforting in a lot of ways. I think that it can be difficult to like grow up in the diaspora because your idea of the culture is like filtered through like your own narrower experience, right? We only had our own families. At best, we had our extended families. And maybe if we were lucky, we grew up in a Vietnamese community. So we had like more examples of what it meant to be Vietnamese. But like if you grow up in the country, you got like 95 million people, you have more examples. So maybe you would have found like the dad who was the kind of dad that you want to be, who spoke in that language. That's kind of part of why I want to go back to Vietnam a lot, is to expand my idea of what it means to be Vietnamese.
Yeah, I mean, I have such a narrow, now that you're bringing that up, I have such a narrow way. I have to open it up a little bit. Narrow way of how I want my kids to perceive me. I want them to see that I'm very, very open and that I can be transparent. And I think putting these titles like the way we have it might be a little bit, I think just being American and the English Americans a little bit more open and free and less hierarchical. But I think the tenderness of con với ba and con với mẹ is but then I almost feel like I'm not being honest and real when I try to bust out this con với ba, because it's like it's so made up
costume.
It's exactly what it is. It's a costume.
So you're gonna be like my Tao when they get a little older.
But that's a costume too, right? That would be all of it.
I'll be a fun one.
Yeah. Because my mom and I have something authentic. It comes from the motherland. It comes from a rich history. And I love that. I love the tenderness of that relationship. But you're right. It doesn't, it just feels off because I don't think of myself as a Vietnamese player in that family, or family player in Vietnamese. Yeah.
Something really therapeutic about comics is like, as opposed to writing autobiography in prose, is that you have to externalize your feelings and you have to draw your body a lot. And actually that was really helpful. Because if you write just in prose, autobio can be like this disembodied voice and you show a lot of your interiority. But when you're drawing autobiographical comics, you have to draw yourself into different situations. So it gives you this perspective on yourself. And I think that helped me with this idea of like speaking Vietnamese or not being a kind of a costume change, because it actually felt like a costume change having to draw myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% makes sense. And these are thoughts that, that's why I'm so grateful to be doing these podcasts, because these are thoughts that I'm not exposed to, and regular people were just never exposed to, the way like a specific art form is being carried out and being executed. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. I had a wonderful time. A little nervous because, when you read a book that has all of your friends and so many people in your Facebook feed, have spoken about it. I remember the wave of excitement and the accolades that I would read online, and finally being able to sit here. It's sometimes a little jarring. I'm not going to lie. I've known Viet Thanh Nguyen for 20 something years because I went to USC, and when he was coming in, we overlapped, and throughout the years, Ham Tran, which is the filmmaker, stayed. He was one of his housemates, and so I would come over. So even at that level for me was, even though I've known him, it's still jarring. But when I don't know somebody, and you read on the book and how it's received and how well it's received in our community, it'd be a little intimidating. And after speaking with people, people are all the same, and they're just wonderful human beings, Vietnamese people.
Yeah. I mean, I made sure to dress down. I didn't wear my leather jacket for you. I was like, okay, this is my Asian American Advocacy Fund hat. I'm just trying to be comfortable. It's also intimidating, getting in front of a camera, and this idea that you have to represent yourself to people who have ideas about you too. It's a bit weird. It's different. Having a public figure persona or keeping one up is exhausting, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. And in real life, I'm a lot more cowboy. I'm a lot more foul mouth. I'm just looser, and I'm funny.
Let's get together and yo.
Exactly. Yeah. So, we have to kind of button it up in these kind of interviews, but hopefully as the years go on and we can get back on and reconvene and talk about other projects for the next 20 years, then it becomes looser and becomes more, you come down to the studio in LA sometime and, sit around on couches and actually talk and just be more lively.
Yes. We'll hit up Viet with his TV show that he's developing, right?
Yes.
Hook us up, Viet.
Yes. Thank you so much, Thi. I really enjoyed today.
Me too. This was great. Thanks, Kenneth. And thank you for, making the Vietnamese podcast. It's such a cool thing to have. When talking about resources that make it easier to continue being us and figuring out who we are. Totally. This is one of those places.
I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Vietnamese with Kenneth Nguyen. The Vietnamese is produced by Brittany Tran. Special thanks to Jane Nguyen, Catherine Nguyen, Tina Pham, Sydney Jamie, and Christo Trin. Please find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at The Vietnamese Podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe, like, and comment. Please rate and give us a review wherever you find our podcasts. Thanks again for listening.